Welcome to a continuance of the recreated presentation I gave to the Educational Program Committee of the Hopewell Valley Regional School District on December 15, 2008. This is the segment relating to the Linux operating system. The Linux operating kernel. A kernel is actually the engine within an operating system. Linus Torvalds possessed a computer with an Intel 386 CPU and yearned for a kernel that would render his computer usable. Linus initiated development of the Linux kernel. Although porting this new kernel to an operating system of computers having different CPUs was not a goal, Linux has been ported to more than 10 various architectures. On the next page, you'll see the architectures on which I've installed Linux. Multiple Linux distributions exist. I began using Debian about 13 years ago and have always been completely satisfied. The IBM PS2 listed at the top is 19 years old. It still functions as my home internet gateway. It executes IP masquerading. The Toshiba listed at the bottom is 6 years old. It was the computer I used for my live Educational Program Committee presentation, and it is the computer I'm currently using to recreate the presentation. Through viewing it, I hope you can imagine the functionality of the Linux operating system and appreciate it. Debian is an extremely highly rated non-commercial distribution. If you haven't heard of it, it's probably because Debian is a non-profit organization that pays nothing for advertising or incentives. The Debian distribution is used as a test platform to develop the R computing language, the language that was so glowingly discussed recently in the New York Times, and the language that I'm trying so desperately to get the Hopewell Valley Regional School District to consider. The Linux operating system will most certainly enhance education quality and cost effectiveness by revitalizing computers of advanced age and by giving students ready access to high quality applications. For example, the GNOME desktop, GCC, C++ and associated libraries, drivers for wireless cards, video recording software, video editing software, the Adobe Flash plugin, and the R computing language are just a few. The Gartner Group investigated the largest 2,000 companies and showed that open source is resulting in higher quality software at lower costs. By the year 2010, they predict that 70% will be using Linux and 90% will be using open source. Linux was highly touted at the NECC 2005 in Philadelphia and at the NECC 2008 in San Antonio. NECC stands for the National Educational Computing Conference. To reduce expenditures, numerous schools use Linux worldwide. Like me, I imagine there are schools whose staff is self-reliant enough to investigate technology and innovative enough to implement their knowledge. Information concerning the use of Linux is everywhere. Although I'm capable of understanding how many organizations function, I can't understand how the school board members are willing to claim utter ignorance but staunchly support the enormous spending of taxpayer money by the Hopewell Valley administration. I also can't understand why anyone unwilling to perform independent investigation would run for the school board in the first place. And who said something about raising a bar? I will depict the computing architecture landscape of Hopewell Valley as follows. I was under the impression that all Hopewell Valley servers use Windows networking, and this was because I was told that the consultants had no Unix knowledge. Recently, Dennis Schmidt, the administrator of technology, told me that Linux is installed on a few servers. When I asked him to explain, he couldn't. I imagine Hopewell had the sense to get new consultants, but what type of contracts were involved? Were the contracts so inexpensive to justify ignoring the pleas from community members wishing to lend their technical assistance? The desktops use First Class, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Internet Explorer, Microsoft Front Page, Adobe Photoshop. I'm not sure what video recorder editor is used, and I was told there's not an analytical program. I don't consider Microsoft Excel to be a serious analytical tool. If anyone from the Hopewell Valley District felt any obligation to the community, Linux would be seriously considered for both servers and desktops. For servers, I would recommend the LAMP architecture. The L is for the Linux operating system, the A is for Apache web surfing, the M is for the MySQL database, and P is for PHP or Perl, a scripting tool. I would recommend the GNOME desktop, the Office Productivity Suite, the Iceweasel HTML browser, which is identical to Mozilla Firefox, but because of copyright infringements, Debian had to use a different name, the ICE HTML editor, the GIMP graphics editor, GIMP stands for GNU Image Manipulation Program, the Keynote video editor, and the R computing language. By the way, R is a scripting language, just like Perl.